Hey everybody, and welcome to Epic Every Day, our weekday podcast for busy, stressed out Christians who want to be reminded of how awesome things could be.
Yes.
I'm Liz Frericks, and this is my husband, Evan.
Good morning.
And we're so glad you guys are here with us on this wonderful Friday. Happy Friday, all you Friday people.
Happy Friday. It's my crew. You got the Monday crew. Anyway, we are glad that you're joining us for part of your day. Thank you for listening, and please do share the show with someone and talk about some of these things. I mean, that's such an important part of our faith, is to share our ideas and to pray together and to try to grow together. And that's what we hope this show is a catalyst for.
So since it's Friday, our CSC of the day is being complete. Complete encompasses kind of three different areas. One is being your entire self. So you're utilizing your whole self all the time. You're authentic to who you are. You're not fragmented, like this is the person you are at work. This is the person you are at home. You're yourself all the time. Second one is being fully in the present. You're not stuck in the past or the future on the worry regret spectrum, but you're actually here now. And the third one is dealing with things as they are. Not as we wish they would be, not as we fear they are, but as they are. That's
a tricky one. Yeah, they're all hard in their own right, but yeah, just the real world and right now. Because in a way, we just have right now. We can't go to the past or the future. We're here now. Mm-hmm. And God's here with us now, too.
Yes. Today, I wanted to share some more out of The Hawk and the Dove by Penelope Wilcock again. I talked a little bit about it yesterday, but if you missed yesterday's episode, it's about these monks around the 1600s is when we think. So one of the main characters is Father Columba, which that means dove. Columba means dove in Latin, and they nickname him Father Peregrine because anyone
he's
less like a dove. Yes, he's not like a dove at all.
This is one of those books where it's like you kind of explain the premise and you're like, oh, I'm going to read about some monks, but it's just
amazing.
The personalities.
It's so good. It pulls you in. Like the writing is amazing. The characters are amazing, and you relate so well. They're just...
It's like any of these books. You were reading A Wind in the Door the other day, and that's about a bunch of kids, and I was talking about the Book of the Dun Cow. It's about a bunch of animals. That doesn't really matter, but we're talking about, there's powerful characters, and there's deep spiritual truths in all of these books that we've mentioned this week.
So in this book, Father Peregrine comes to become the head, the abbot of the monastery, and he's very strong and aristocratic and...
Proud.
Yeah, proud. Mm-hmm. And then he gets really badly beat up. They shatter his shin bone and his hands, and it really messes him up. So I'm going to read this little section. It was as though their abbot had been taken away, and this was another man, used to the imperious, aristocratic, decisive figure they had known, with his swift, purposeful stride and his hands gesturing in patience. They were appalled by the look of him. He had grown very thin, his face disfigured by the livid scar, his eyes shadowed with pain. His hands were good for almost nothing now, and although he did not try to conceal them, he no longer moved them as he talked, but kept them still. He went every day to the infirmary at Brother Edward's insistence, so that Edward might massage the broken hands with his healing aromatic oils and help him exercise them. Yet though he could feed himself, albeit slowly and with difficulty, and write, though laboriously and untidily, he would never again work on fine manuscript illumination, or sit late at night writing essays, sermons, and poems. He could not even cut up his food or fasten his own sandals, and the hands tended to cramp into claws if Brother Edward left off his care of them for any length of time. He, goes from this really powerful man to this really broken man, and he kind of falls apart because of it. And Brother Tom is one of the other main characters, and he is fairly new to being in the monastery. He becomes a monk.
Not very pious.
No, he's not. He becomes, it's not a monk, it's like a novitiate, a novice.
Yeah, he hasn't been fully kind of enrolled into the community yet.
Right. And he was always a little bit afraid of Father Peregrine.
Yeah, their relationship was just so fun to watch unfold.
Right. But he happens to go to Father Peregrine's office. He's supposed to be dropping some letters off. But when he comes in, he sees Father Peregrine. He was sitting hunched over his table, gazing dully at nothing in particular, sitting very still, except he was repeating one slow gesture. He was wiping the side of his scarred hand slowly across his mouth, like a little child that wipes away the crumbs of food before he runs out to play, or the old man whose frail and shaky hand wipes away the dribble of saliva from the sunken lips of his toothless mouth. It could have been absent-mindedness, could have been the unconscious gesture of a man deep in thought, but watching, Tom realized, and the realization wrung him, that the slow, repeated movement, the slight frown, the gazing but unseeing eyes, all were nothing to do with being lost in thought or absent dreaming. The man was tortured by unbearable misery. At last, he let his hand drop and laid his face down upon it, not weeping, hardly even breathing, just tensely, despairingly still. Brother Tom felt ashamed that his response was a strange, unreasonable resentment. His discomfort crystallized into a prayer. "Oh, God, what do I do now?" He felt awkward about being there, witnessing the misery that lay behind his abbot's dignified and unruffled composure. He wanted to slip away, but could not ignore the question that whispered inside. If it was me, could I face it alone? And he tries to kind of leave, but then he sits down and instinct got the better of him, and reaching out his hand, he laid it on the other man's arm without even thinking. Father Peregrine lifted his head and looked at him. For a minute his eyes were bewildered, unfocused in the scarred and haggard face. His lips worked a little, but no sound emerged, like a man who has forgotten how to speak. Then with a sigh he smiled and looked attention at Brother Tom. "I do beg your pardon, brother," he said quietly, in a most normal, level tone. "I was not aware of you. Can I help?" Tom was dumbfounded. "I doubt it," he said at last, bluntly. "Not in the state you're in." Father Peregrine just looked at him, opened his mouth to speak, but closed it again, shook his head, shrugged his shoulders, and said nothing. Again the picture flashed in Tom's mind of his mother carrying the bowl of milk, carefully, oh, so carefully. One jog and he'll spill the lot, he thought, and by my faith, he needs to spill that grief. "Maybe if you could tell me, Father, well, perhaps I could help you," ventured Tom, unsure, feeling irritated at his own uneasiness in the face of the desolation his superior was struggling to master. "Son, it is good of you to ask," he said eventually, "but my burdens are not for you to carry." His voice was a little uneven, and the tension of maintaining his self-control was causing him to shake slightly. "My son, forgive my discourtesy. Unless your errand is urgent, might we discuss it some other time?" Half of Brother Tom wanted to say, "Of course, Father, I quite understand," and beat a hasty retreat. He never knew where the other half got the courage from, but he replied, "To be honest with you, I've forgotten why I came, but I know why I'm not going." Without giving himself time to think better of it, he followed his impulse, and leaping to his feet, dragged the heavy table askew, so he could approach the abbot, who watched him wide-eyed, white-faced, and, Tom realized with a stab of pity, scared. Brother Tom seized the stool, placed it emphatically beside his superior's chair, and sitting on it, took the man in his arms and held him close. "It's all right," he said gently. "You can let it go." He cursed himself for a fool as he felt the awful rigidity of him, like a man of wood, but he persisted, holding him, not speaking, his thoughts racing. "Oh well, might as well be hung for a sheep as for a lamb. Faith, I wish I'd shut the door. I hope to God nobody walks in on this. Maybe I should go now." But as Brother Tom held him, and the fortress of his iron self-control was replaced at last by the fortress of the arms of someone who loved him more than he was in awe of him, Peregrine began to weep, and wept until he lost all self-control and abandoned himself to sobbing grief. "My hands," he wept, the words barely intelligible. "Oh God, how shall I bear the loss of my hands? To have died would have been nothing, but my hands, oh God." The words were lost in uncontrollable tears. What comfort could Brother Tom bring but his presence and his silence and his holding him?
It's a lot like when the thief, he loses his hand, he thinks that his identity is so wrapped up in this physical ability. And then he is coming to terms with something beyond, something more amazing and free.
Right. Well, and I love this picture because sometimes I think when we think about complete, we think of calm, the bad kind of calm. Not the calm that is processing the pain and that is there and that is, weeping uncontrollably. Like, that's a kind of calm too. Mm-hmm. It's the being in the moment, the working through the pain and being able to still be yourself and to not be stuck in the worry regret spectrum because he's processing this is what happened. He's not lying to himself. And that's how we be present, and that's how we stop carrying emotional baggage. We unpack it and we process it with someone who loves us.
You okay?
Yes, I just love that part.
So yeah, it's so important to realize that the time thing and being where we're at right now. Henri Nouwen has this great, he's got lots of great works, and some of them get sent out in a daily meditation that I get in my email. And here's the one from July 7th. Henri Nouwen says, "Time heals, people often say. This is not true when it means that we will eventually forget the wounds inflicted on us and be able to live on as if nothing happened. That's not really healing. It's simply ignoring reality. But when the expression time heals means that faithfulness in a difficult relationship can lead us to a deeper understanding of the ways we've hurt each other, then there is much truth in it. Time heals implies not passively waiting, but actively working with our pain and trusting in the possibility of forgiveness and reconciliation." And that's the time that Tom was giving Father Peregrine to take time and to experience reality. Right. And not to just stuff it away and wait until I've sort of forgotten exactly what the pain was about, and that's not appropriate. Right. We never want that to be our goal, where we're just like, just maybe it'll blow over. Right. We need to actively engage in what's really happening, and that often involves pain. But right. Pain in community, the right kind of community, it's like when you talk about post-traumatic healing, it's this synergy of love, and I think that's how we're really designed to live.
Right. I totally agree. And it's so beautiful. And that's one of the reasons why I love Complete Day, because it's about being outside of our, having unpacked our baggage, mm-hmm. being free from our emotional baggage, and being ourself all the time. Like, Father Peregrine in there, he's able to pretend that he's okay in front of everybody else. But then when he gets by himself, he's falling apart. Mm-hmm. And it's only when he's his full self, when he's falling apart in front of someone else, that's where healing takes place. And it's not in suppressing parts of himself, but just being his whole self.
And it's not natural for him to seek someone to be that vulnerable with. And it kind of gets thrust upon him there. But right. He's better off for it, because he could still command Tom to leave. Right. But he doesn't.
He tries to. Yeah. He suggests it, but...
So now we were going to pivot to something still about Complete, but a little different.
Yes. So this is Out of My Life and Hard Times by James Thurber. James Thurber is famous for humorous writings. Yeah. And they are all completely ridiculous. So this story is about kind of his growing up years. This one is titled The Day the Dam Broke. My memories of what my family and I went through during the 1913 flood in Ohio I would gladly forget. And yet neither the hardships we endured nor the turmoil and confusion we experienced can alter my feeling toward my native state and city. I am having a fine time now and wish Columbus were here, but if anyone ever wished a city was in hell, it was during that frightful and perilous afternoon in 1913 when the dam broke. Or, to be more exact, when everybody in town thought the dam broke. We were both ennobled and demoralized by the experience. The only possible means of escape for us was to flee the house, a step which my grandfather sternly forbade, brandishing his old army saber in his hand. Meanwhile, hundreds of people were streaming by our house in wild panic, screaming, "Go east! Go east!" We had to stun Grandfather with the ironing board. Impeded as we were by the inert form of the old gentleman, he was taller than 6 feet and weighed almost 170 pounds. We were passed in the first half-mile by practically everybody else in the city. Had Grandfather not come to at the corner of Parsons Avenue and Town Street, we would unquestionably have been overtaken and engulfed by the roaring waters. That is, if there had been any roaring waters. Later, when the panic had died down and people had gone rather sheepishly back to their homes and their offices, minimizing the distances they had run, and offering various reasons for running, city engineers pointed out that even if the dam had broken, the water level would not have risen more than 2 additional inches in the west side. The west side was, at the time of the dam scare, under 30 feet of water, as indeed were all Ohio river towns during the great spring floods of 20 years ago. The east side, where we lived and where all the running occurred, had never been in any danger at all. Only a rise of some 95 feet could have caused the floodwaters to flow over High Street, the thoroughfare that divided the east side of town from the west. The fact that we were all as safe as kittens under a cook stove did not, however, assuage in the least the fine despair and the grotesque desperation which seized upon the residents of the east side when the cry spread like a grass fire that the dam had given way. Some of the most dignified, staid, cynical, and clear-thinking men in town abandoned their wives, stenographers, homes, and offices and ran east. There are few alarms in the world more terrifying than, "The dam has broken!" There are few persons capable of stopping to reason when that clarion cry strikes upon their ears, even persons who live in towns no nearer than 500 miles to a dam. And so he goes on to tell the story of how, suddenly someone was running, maybe they forgot something, and then a few other people ran, and suddenly the cry went up, "The dam has broken!"
Right.
But then you have all these people either running to the tops of buildings or, running down the streets trying to get out of town. And it just is such a perfect picture of what we do in our lives when we're not dealing with reality. That's why the complete is so important, because if we're dealing with this false perception, whether it's, oh, so-and-so hates me because they didn't, do what you expected them to do, or somebody, you're walking by and you say hi to somebody and they don't respond and you're like, oh no, they hate me now. But it turns out that they just didn't see you, or, there's all these different perceptions that we have, and we attribute meanings to the things that we see, and sometimes it's not the right meaning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it takes an outside perspective to help us understand that stuff and to really assimilate it into a worldview that makes any sense at all.
Right. And that's why we want to, stay calm, not start running when we're like, oh no, the dam is broken. Mm-hmm. We got to take a second, be calm, think through, okay, Lord, what's really going on here? And that's how we can then respond well. It's not by getting into a panic and, like I said, attributing meanings to these things. I think it's so funny that it just started with a couple people running. Maybe they were late to a meeting or something, and then suddenly the whole town is running east. Yeah. So we have to be careful. We want to be here now, dealing with what's actually happening and free from our emotional baggage.
Consuming literature like this can help us kind of internalize the CSCs and remember what's important, and just practicing the CSCs like we advocate on the show every week is the best way we found to stay in touch with that oh so important reality. So that we're not running east like a bunch of lemmings.
As always, pick whether today is going to be awesome or not, whether you're going to strengthen those neural pathways to look for the good things, or strengthen the neural pathways to look for the not so good things in your life, because you have a choice, and whatever you choose will affect how you live your life. Make the right choice. Mm-hmm. We love you guys, and we are praying for you. Thanks to everybody that's been listening to the show and sharing the show. We really appreciate it. If you have found this episode helpful or interesting, please do share it. And come back next week, and we're going to discuss doubt.
Yeah, doubt and faith, I would imagine.
Yes. All right, you guys, have an awesome weekend.
See you later.